Hey friends, it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be making a card using the Hello Bluebird Little Hugs stamp set. So I have stamped those images out on Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock with Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink, and I'll be coloring with my Copic markers. I'm going to start with the bunnies, and I'm going to color them using some E50s. I really like the E50s for bunnies because they do look quite natural. I have so many little bunnies in my yard this spring and summer, and so I'm quite familiar with the shading that they are, so I really like this combo. So it's E50, E51, E53, and E55. I laid in my shadows first with that E55 and then started to blend that out with the E53. I also added in a little heart shape on the bunny's face so that the area where the eyes, nose, and mouth are will be left white. And then I'm going to blend out that E53 with some E51. So the majority of the bunny's bodies will be just the darkest three shades, but I will add in a little extra of that E50 on the belly and on the lower part of the face, and I'll put some on the insides of the ears as well, which I will later add some pink to, but I like having a little bit of that brown undertone in there because it just makes the pink look a bit more natural. And then I'm going to do the baby bunny very much the same, just being very careful with that E55. I don't want to go too dark on the baby, so I just stayed really close to the outside edges. And then I'm adding those shadows on the left hand side since the baby bunny is facing toward the right, and just blending out, and again leaving a little bit of white space on the lower part of the face, also drawing in that half heart shape, and then on the belly. I'm also going to take the three lightest shades and color in the bodies of my hedgehogs. So I'm starting with that E53 and laying in my shadows with that right up against where their little spikes are. And then I'll come in with the E51 and begin to blend that out. Just coloring right over the edge of that E53 so I get a nice smooth blend, and then pulling that color out a little bit farther. And then I'll use the E50 as my lightest, and again I left a little bit of white space around the muzzle and on the belly, just a little sliver for some extra highlight. Then I'm going to bring in E57 and E59, and I'll use those with the E55 that I already had out to do the spikes on the hedgehogs. So I'm starting with that E59 and adding that darkest shade right around their bodies, and then also adding a few extra strokes here and there. And then I'll blend that out with the E57, just pulling that color out a bit, but leaving plenty of white space for my highlight, which is going to be that E55. And I'm just doing little tiny dash motions to fill all of that in. You can also leave a little bit of white space if you want. It makes it look extra shiny, but I decided to color it in completely for these guys here today. And then while I still have those E50s out, I'm going to keep those lightest two shades. I'm also going to do the white parts on my fox, which is the lower part of the face, the belly, the inside of the ears, and the tip of the tail. With both of those shades, starting with the E51, blending out with the E50, and then just letting the white cardstock be the highlight for those areas. And I will even add a little bit of that E51 and then the E50 to the mother squirrel's belly and the inside of her ear. Then I'm going to switch to some orange shades for my fox. I'm using YR12, YR14, and YR18. This is my favorite combo for foxes. So I'm starting with the YR18, and on the mama, her shadows are going to fall on the right hand side since she's facing toward the left, and then I'm going to reverse it for the baby, put the shadows on the left since she's facing toward the right. So once I have that YR18 laid in, I'm going to start to blend that out with the YR14. I am leaving like a little white sock on the paw just for something different, but you could color in completely if you want to. You can also leave the little foot white if you want to. I did end up coloring that in with the orange shades as well, but it's really personal preference. And then I'm just going to fill in any remaining white space where I want it to be orange with that lightest shade, the YR12. And then I'll do the same combo for the baby, but again, just like I did with the bunny, I'm going to try to be as sparing as I can with that darkest shade, the YR18. I don't know why I usually like the parent to be a little bit darker and the baby to be a little bit lighter, but honestly, it doesn't really matter. They could be the same shade or you can even reverse it, but somehow that just makes sense to me, so that's what I did. Although, honestly, I think they ended up looking pretty similar in tone, which is totally fine too. So once I finish my foxes, I'm going to move on to the squirrels. And I decided to do gray squirrels today, even though red squirrels are my favorite. I just wanted to have something represented in the color palette that I hadn't used yet. So I decided to go with these kind of grayish tones that I often like to use for mice, but I think they work well for a bunch of different critters. But it is W00 and W1 combined with E70 and E71. So I'm working on the mama squirrel first. Her shadows are going to fall on the right hand side. The baby's shadows will fall on the left, just based on how they're facing. Like I said, I like to keep the face nice and light so you can make out all their features. Started with the E71 for her, blended out with the E70, then I used a little of the W1 and then transitioned into the W00 for the highlight. And then I'm moving on to the tail. I decided to break it up and do it in two parts since her tail is quite large. But then I realized that the tail just didn't have enough contrast for me, especially in the curve of the tail and the part that was right behind her body, where her body would be casting a shadow. So I did bring in E74 for that as well, just to darken things up a bit and create a bit more depth. So I laid that E74 in and then blended back out with the E71. And then I'm coming in with the E70 and taking that up toward the top. I figured the light would be hitting the top the most, so that's where I'm going to put my lightest shades using the W1 and then a little of that W00. And then I'll move on to the baby, but I'm going back to the E71 for the baby and adding my shading with that. I did toss a little bit of the E74 in just on the curve of the tail and the base of the tail on the underside, and then blend it out with the E71, and then I'm just going to work my way back down from darkest to lightest to the very top edge of that, and then I'll go back and finish the rest of the baby since I kind of was concentrating on the tail once I got that going. So I'll just finish her off as well. And then I want to bring in some pink tones for some rosy cheeks and also the insides of the ears and some of their noses. And I went with cool toned pinks. I thought that they looked nice with the color combos that I was using. So I went with RV10 and RV11. Like I said, I'm going to give everybody some rosy cheeks. I'm going to add a little bit to the insides of their ears as well, using that RV11 first, and then blending out with the RV10. And then once I'm done with everybody, I will go back in and add the RV11 to the noses of the mama bunny and the mama squirrel, which were the only ones that had it like open. And then I also colored in 2 of the hearts. I just picked different sizes with this combo, and I added in a little extra of that RV11 to darken it up. And then while I was doing their noses, I realized that I forgot to do the bunny's tails. So I'm just going to go back to my E70 and add a few little dots in there to make it look nice and fluffy. And then I'm going to switch my red combos to R81 R83 and R85, and I'll do 2 more of the hearts. And again, I'm just picking different sizes, adding the darkest shade on the bottom right and blending toward the top left. You could do either way. I just decided to pick that way because it's easiest for me as a left-handed person, but also the bigger images, the mom images, were all shaded on the right as well. And then for the last 2 hearts, I just added in R89 and then blended out with the R85, and then I'll use the R83 for the highlight. So I didn't use the R81 on these darker hearts at all. So I'm just going to fill those in, and then I did add a touch extra of that R89 and just blended back out again to make sure that that was nice and smooth. And then I'm going to trim these images out with their matching dies. For my background, I've taken a piece of Bristol smooth surface cardstock and cut that down to be 5 1/4 by 5 1/4 inches, which is going to be the same size as my card front. And I'm going to do a quick watercolor background using some Distress Oxide inks. The color that I'm using for the sky is Salvage Patina, and I'm actually taking the Hello Bluebird Gallery Frame 7 and using that as a template. Since I will be using this die later on, I'm just going to use it as a template to get my watercoloring in the right places, because I wanted to have that color concentrated in the center of each of those squares and then fade to white at the edges. So I'm just painting that on, and I'm trying not to be too consistent with the amount of color I'm laying down. I want there to be some darker areas and some lighter areas. So I'm just kind of tapping that brush along the surface, and I'll even go back in and add a few extra little dots of color here and there, which will disperse since that paper is wet now and kind of soften a bit. But I'll just add a little bit more concentrated color in a few extra places. And I'm just evening out the edges of those squares so that I have them how I want them. And then once I'm happy with how the sky is looking, I'm going to switch to some mowed lawn for the grass. So I'm just going to press that onto my block as well and add some water to that. And I'll start to paint that down in the lower part of each of those squares. And I will let that run into the sky. I want them to kind of overlap and mix and meld a little bit and just get really nice and soft. I'm actually adding some extra water to that block as well because I wanted to have some areas of that green that were a bit softer. So I wanted to have more water that I could dip into. And I'm just using a fine number 2 paintbrush to paint that in, just so I have a little bit more control. And I'm kind of doing it in like a little, almost like a zigzag pattern a little bit to kind of indicate some grasses, but I wanted it to be really organic and loose and, you know, not too specific. I just wanted it to be a soft background because I want the images that I spent so much time coloring to really shine in the front. I am adding a bit more of that darker green, just like I did with the sky. And then I decided that the sky was looking a little less vibrant, so I did decide to add a little extra of that Salvage Patina back onto my block, and I'll mix that up with a little bit of water and then tap some extra color on there. And, you know, just darken up a few extra little areas. And then I am going to add some water to that and dilute it just a bit because it was a bit too vibrant then. So I'm just softening some of those to make them flow a little bit more so they're not quite so precise. I did accidentally get a little bit of green up too high in my top 2 corners, so I'm just going to grab a paper towel and kind of dab that away. And it's not really a big deal because my critters are going to cover up where that kind of ink kind of blended anyway, so it's not a big deal. But once I'm happy with that, I will set this panel aside to dry, and in the meantime I'm going to work on my sentiment. So I'm stamping a sentiment from those Little Hugs stamp set with Versified Onyx Black ink on MFT Snow Cone cardstock, and it says, "Wishing I could hug you." Stamped down perfectly the first time, so I just set that aside, and now I'm popping my card base in my MISTI, and I did trim that down to 5 1/4 by 10 1/2, and then folded it in half, so it's 5 1/4 square. And I'm stamping the little bear image on there, which is the 5th animal in that stamp set, and then "Love You So Very Much" down at the bottom with Lawn Fawn Mermaid ink. The frame that I'm using is from the Flora number 6 from Cardabella, and I actually had created a different card, and this was the leftovers from that, so I'm just reusing those leftovers now to make a second card. I think I did that first card maybe a month or 2 ago, so if you're interested in checking that out, you can find that on my channel. But I wanted to use that frame. I didn't want it to go to waste, so I added some foam tape behind that, just peeled off the release papers, and now I'm going to line it up over the watercolored background. Just make sure I have that on there nice and straight how I want it, and then press that down into place. And then I will grab my card base and some liquid glue, and I'm going to glue that to the card front, and it is going to be the exact same size, so it will fit completely. So I'm going to pinch those corners together of the frame and the card base just to make sure everything is on there nice and straight. And then I can bring in my images, which I have added foam tape to the back of all of them, including the little hearts. I'll grab my Twiddler's Nook embellishment tray to catch all of those little release papers, and then I can just take that whole thing over to the garbage can and dump it out. Makes it so nice and easy. And then I'm going to start adding my little critters into the squares, and I'm putting them a little bit more toward the right hand side of each of those sections, except for kind of the squirrels. The squirrels pretty much took up enough space that I put them pretty much in the center, but all of the rest of the critters I centered a little bit more toward the right hand side just to kind of make it consistent there. And then I'm going to take all of those little hearts and start adding those kind of on the top left corner. So in every other corner I'll add a medium and a small, and then the next one I will add one large, and then I'm going to swap it. So for the fox, I'm going to put just one large, so it's opposite the top right corner. And then in the bottom right corner, I'll add a medium and a small again, just to mix it up, make it look a little bit more interesting. I trimmed down my sentiment into a little banner, and I'm going to glue that on the crossbar in the center of the card. So I'm just adding a little bit of liquid glue there, and then making sure it's centered there and I have equal amount of space on both the left and the right. And then of course I had to add a little bit of glitter. So I'm taking some Stardust Stickles and just adding that to the right side of each of those little heart die cuts, and that is going to finish off this card. So I will lift that up so you can see all of that detail and catch that shimmer, and then I'll give you another peek at the inside. I really hope you guys enjoyed this one. I had so much fun playing with this stamp set. I think it's so super adorable. If you did like it, please be sure to hit that thumbs up button and subscribe if you haven't already. You can also ring that notification bell if you always want to be alerted when I post a new video. All of the products I use will be listed and linked for you in the description bar below. And if you'd like to keep watching, here are 2 extra videos I thought you might also enjoy. You can click on either one to check them out. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you had a good one, and I will see you soon in another video. Bye-bye.